I was 15 when I first realized that money wasn't just about numbers on a bank statement. For my family, money was like a battlefield. My grandpa Frank believed every single dollar should be guarded like it was gold in Fort Knox. My mom, Rebecca, on the other hand, thought money was meant to be enjoyed. Dinners out, little vacations, gifts that made life brighter, and me, I was stuck in the middle. It usually started small. Like one evening, I came home from school, tossed my backpack on the couch, and instantly felt the tension in the air. Grandpa was at the kitchen table, flipping through his old leather wallet like he was reviewing some top-secret financial documents. Mom stood at the stove, stirring a pot of pasta, but you could tell by the way she slammed the spoon that something was brewing. "Rebecca," Grandpa said, his voice firm, "you don't need to be wasting $30 on scented candles." $30? That's half a week's groceries if you shop smart. Mom whipped around, her ponytail snapping like a whip. "Dad, it's just candles. They make the house smell nice. God forbid we live a little." I sat down quietly at the table, wishing I could disappear, but Grandpa wasn't done. "Live a little? That's what you call throwing away hard-earned money? You think Social Security grows trees out back?" His eyes, sharp and gray, narrowed on her like she was committing a crime. Mom rolled her eyes. "Oh, please, you've been saving every penny your whole life, and for what? To sit here counting coins while the world passes you by? Money's supposed to make life better, not just sit in a drawer." The air between them was like a stretched rubber band. One wrong word, and it would snap. And I swear, I'd seen this same fight play out 100 times, but this time felt different. Grandpa slammed his wallet shut and leaned back in his chair. "You're reckless, Rebecca. Reckless with money, reckless with your life. That's why your marriage didn't last. That's why—" Mom's face went pale. For a second, I thought she was going to cry. Instead, she lifted her chin and spoke so quietly it gave me chills. "Don't bring that up, Dad. Don't you dare!" The room went dead silent. Even the pasta stopped bubbling. I swallowed hard, my chest tight. Whenever Grandpa mentioned Mom's divorce, it was like pressing a red button you were never supposed to touch. And yet, he did it anyway. Finally, Mom turned off the stove, wiped her hands on a towel, and walked out of the kitchen without another word. Grandpa sat there, arms crossed, breathing like he'd just run a marathon. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing their voices in my head, the clash between saving and spending, survival and living. And deep down, I wondered who was right. But what I didn't know back then was that these little fights weren't just fights. They were the beginning of something bigger. Something darker. Something that would make me see both my mom and my grandfather in ways I never imagined. Because soon, Mom's way of making peace wouldn't be enough. Her little gifts, her small apologies, like they would stop working. And that's when everything would spiral into revenge. The next morning, the house felt like a war zone after the bombs had dropped. No shouting, no slamming, just silence. My mom avoided Grandpa. Grandpa avoided Mom, and me? I just tried to stay invisible, shoving cereal into my mouth and hoping no one noticed. But Mom wasn't the type to stay mad forever. That's one thing I knew about her. She had this way of making peace, even when Grandpa went too far. That evening, when Grandpa came back from his walk around the block, the man never skipped it. Rain or shine, he found a small box on the kitchen table. It was wrapped in shiny paper, the kind you'd find in the clearance section at Target. A little crooked bow sat on top. Grandpa squinted at it. "What's this?" Mom, leaning against the counter with a glass of water, shrugged. "Just open it, Dad." I sat across from him, pretending to scroll on my phone but watching every second. Grandpa untied the bow and peeled back the paper. Inside was a brand new leather wallet. Dark brown, smooth, expensive looking but not flashy. The kind of wallet you'd imagine in the hands of someone who respected money. He stared at it for a long moment. His old wallet, the one he carried everywhere, was cracked at the edges, stuffed with faded receipts and bent grocery coupons. This one was sleek, clean, perfect. You bought this?" he asked quietly. Mom smiled. "Yeah, thought maybe it was time you had something new. Don't worry, I used a coupon." That last line made me laugh, and even Grandpa cracked a smile. For a moment, it felt like the fight never happened. Grandpa slipped the wallet into his pocket, testing the fit, and nodded approvingly. "Well, I suppose it's all right." That was his version of thank you. Later that night, I saw them sitting in the living room. Mom had made popcorn, and Grandpa was actually watching a movie with her. No arguing, no insults, no cold silence. Just two people, father and daughter, acting like family again, and I thought, maybe this was it. Maybe the wallet had fixed things. Maybe the fighting was finally over, but I was wrong. The peace lasted only a few days. Then it started again. This time it was about electricity bills. Mom wanted to put up string lights in the backyard. To make it cozy, she said. Grandpa called it burning money for decoration. The argument grew louder, sharper, like fire catching dry wood. I sat in my room, headphones on, trying not to hear but failing. Every word carried through the walls, and then, just like before, a few days later, Mom bought him something small, a new mug that said "World's Best Dad," and once again, the storm passed. That became their cycle. Fight, gift, peace. Fight, gift, peace. But after a while, I started noticing something strange. The gifts weren't just thoughtful. They were strategic. Mom always bought things that connected to Grandpa's weaknesses. His pride, his habits, his stubborn little routines, the wallet. The mug, a set of warm socks for his morning walks. It was like she knew exactly what string to pull to make him soften. And I started wondering, was this just love, or was it manipulation? One night, I overheard Mom talking on the phone with her friend. "Kelly, I was walking to the kitchen for a glass of water when I froze in the hallway. I swear." Kelly, if I didn't give him little presents. "He'd never shut up," Mom whispered, her voice sharp. "It's the only way to keep him quiet. And honestly, it's not like he ever appreciates what I do anyway." My stomach dropped. That's when I realized these gifts weren't just about peace. They were about control, and I started to think, if Mom could play that game, so could Grandpa. And when that war of control finally exploded, I would be the one caught in the middle. But back then, I didn't know how bad it would get. I didn't know that one day the gifts wouldn't be enough, and that's when revenge would take over. If you asked me back then, I would have told you that the fights between Mom and Grandpa were just part of life, like bad weather. They came, they went, and you just learned to live with them. But that summer, something changed. The fights stopped being funny little arguments. They started to feel dangerous. It was mid-July, boiling hot, the kind of heat where the air feels thick. Grandpa had always refused to turn on the air conditioning. "Waste of electricity," he'd bark. "Just open a window." Mom, drenched in sweat after mowing the lawn, stormed inside and cranked the AC on full blast. Within seconds, I knew we were about to witness World War III. Grandpa marched into the living room, veins bulging in his forehead. "Rebecca, turn that thing off right now." "No, Dad," she snapped, wiping sweat from her face. "It's 95 degrees outside." 95? I'm not going to let us sit here and melt just because you're obsessed with saving a couple dollars. Grandpa slammed his hand on the thermostat, switching it off. Mom shoved his hand away and turned it back on. Back and forth like kids fighting over a toy. I sat on the couch, frozen, wishing I could vanish. Finally, Grandpa shouted, "This is my house. My rules, if you don't like it, you can leave." The words hit the air like a thunderclap. Mom froze. For a moment, she just stared at him, her chest rising and falling. Then, with a voice colder than ice, she said, "You know what, Dad? Maybe I should." She walked away, slamming her bedroom door so hard the walls shook. That night, the house felt like it was cracking in two. Grandpa stayed in the living room, muttering under his breath about bills and waste and spoiled generations. Mom locked herself in her room, the glow of her phone screen leaking out from under the door. And me? I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, realizing something terrifying. This wasn't about money anymore. This was personal. The next morning, Mom acted like nothing happened. She made pancakes, humming to herself, even poured Grandpa his coffee. When she slid the plate in front of him, he looked suspicious. "What's this about?" he asked, squinting. She smiled sweetly. "Just breakfast." "Don't worry, Dad." But then I saw it. A brand new wristwatch peeking out from under a napkin on the table. Not expensive, but shiny, classic, exactly Grandpa's style. His eyes softened. He picked it up slowly, holding it like treasure. "You bought this for me?" he asked. "Of course," Mom said. "You deserve nice things too." Just like that, the storm was over. But here's the thing. It didn't feel like peace anymore. It felt like poison, Like every gift wasn't kindness but a weapon, a way to silence him. I started noticing Grandpa pushing back harder after that. The fights grew nastier, his words sharper, her gifts bigger. They were locked in this twisted dance of attack and surrender, strike and soothe. And I hated it. One night I caught Grandpa in the garage, sitting alone, clutching the new watch. He didn't notice me watching from the doorway. He muttered to himself, voice low and bitter. She thinks she can buy her way out of everything. She thinks I don't see it. But she's wrong. She's wrong. The hair on my arms stood up. That's when I realized Grandpa wasn't just angry anymore. He was plotting. And for the first time in my life, I saw something in his eyes that scared me. Not just anger. Not just stubbornness. But revenge. The war over saving and spending wasn't just a family argument anymore. It was turning into something darker. Something that would change all of us forever. The first time I noticed Grandpa's plan in action, it didn't look like much. It was small, almost invisible. But that's the thing about revenge. It rarely starts with fireworks. It starts with whispers. It was a Saturday morning. Mom had just come home from the store with 2 shopping bags filled with groceries. She hummed as she unpacked them, pulling out organic juice, fresh fruit, a box of cupcakes she bought just because. Grandpa sat at the table, sipping his black coffee, eyes sharp like a hawk. "Rebecca," he said slowly, "how much did all this cost?" Mom froze for half a second before forcing a smile. "Don't worry, Dad, it wasn't much." He leaned forward. "How much?" She sighed. 50, maybe 60. Grandpa's mouth curled into something that wasn't quite a smile. "Interesting." "Because last week, I checked the bank statement." The color drained from Mom's face. That's when it hit me. Grandpa had gone through her account. He leaned back in his chair, tapping his coffee mug. "It wasn't $60, Rebecca. It was $94. $94 for cupcakes and juice." He spit the word cupcakes like it was poison. Mom slammed the box on the counter. "You went through my account?" "That's not your business, Dad." Grandpa's eyes glinted. "It's my house. Everything here is my business." The argument exploded from there. Yelling, accusations, Mom swearing she deserved to enjoy life, Grandpa calling her reckless, irresponsible. But this time, something felt different. He wasn't just angry. He was calculated, and that's when I realized Grandpa had started keeping score. Over the next few weeks, it got worse. Every dollar Mom spent, Grandpa found out. A new blouse from Target. He called it wasting money on rags. Dinner out with her friends? He shamed her in front of me, saying, "Guess Rebecca's too rich for home-cooked meals." Mom tried to fight back. She bought him more gifts, a pair of slippers, a framed photo of the two of us together, but it didn't work anymore. The peace didn't stick. One night I heard Mom crying in her room. She thought I was asleep, but her voice carried through the thin walls. "I can't do this anymore, Kelly," she whispered on the phone. "He's controlling everything. Watching me like I'm some teenager who needs permission. I swear it's like he wants me to feel small." I lay awake, my stomach twisted, because I knew she was right. Grandpa wasn't trying to protect her. He was trying to break her, but the scariest part? He was winning. One afternoon, I walked into the kitchen and found Mom standing over the trash can, tearing up receipts with shaking hands. She looked at me, startled, then forced a smile. "Hey, sweetheart. Just cleaning up, but I knew better." She was hiding things, trying to cover her tracks. Grandpa had pushed her into living like a fugitive in her own home. And me? I was stuck watching, powerless, but deep down I started to feel something I hadn't before. Not just fear, not just sadness, but anger, because if this was revenge, it wasn't just against Mom, it was against me too, against our whole family, and I promised myself, if Grandpa kept pushing, if he went one step further, I wouldn't just sit back and watch, I would fight back, even if it meant revenge of my own. By the time August rolled around, I was done being the quiet kid in the corner. For weeks, I'd watched Grandpa tear into Mom, digging through her spending, humiliating her over every dollar, twisting every argument until she ended up apologizing, and every time she gave him a gift to make peace, it hurt me a little more. Because I knew it wasn't peace, it was surrender. One night, I sat on my bed, staring at my phone, and something inside me snapped. If Grandpa was going to play dirty, then so was I. The first chance came sooner than I expected. Grandpa had this little metal box he kept in the top drawer of his nightstand. He thought no one knew about it, but I did. I'd seen him slip it open once when he thought I wasn't looking. Inside was a stack of cash, hundreds, maybe thousands. His emergency savings, he called it. I never told Mom about it because, honestly, I thought it was kind of cool, like Grandpa had a secret treasure stash. But now that treasure looked more like a weapon. One afternoon, when Grandpa was out on his daily walk and Mom was napping on the couch, I crept into his room. My heart pounded so loud I thought it might give me away. I opened the drawer, slid out the box, and lifted the lid. The cash was still there, neatly folded, smelling faintly of old paper and dust. I didn't take it. Not yet. Instead, I pulled out my phone and snapped a picture. Then another. I had proof. That night, during dinner, Grandpa went on his usual rant. Mom had bought a new blender, and he was calling it a luxury toy. I couldn't take it anymore. I slammed my fork down. "You're calling her reckless?" I said, my voice shaking. "You're the one hoarding thousands of dollars in your nightstand while acting like we're broke." The room froze. Grandpa's face went red. "What did you just say?" Mom looked at me shocked. "What are you talking about?" I pulled out my phone, slid it across the table. The pictures glowed on the screen. Stacks of cash, the metal box, undeniable. Mom's eyes widened. She turned to Grandpa, betrayal written all over her face. "Dad, is this true?" For the first time, Grandpa didn't have words. He opened his mouth, then closed it, his jaw tightening. Mom stood up, her chair scraping the floor. "All this time, you've been shaming me for spending a few dollars here and there, making me feel like a failure and you had money hidden away?" Grandpa's voice cracked as he tried to defend himself. "It's for emergencies." "Emergencies?" Mom snapped. "You mean control. You've been using money to control us, to humiliate me, while you sit on a pile of cash." I'd never seen my mom so furious. Tears burned in her eyes, but her voice was steady, sharp like broken glass. Grandpa stood, trembling, his fists clenched. For a second, I thought he might actually hit me, but then he saw the way I was staring at him, not scared. Not small anymore. Angry. Ready to fight. And something in him broke. He sank back into his chair, silent. Mom grabbed her purse, threw on her jacket, and stormed out the door. I followed her, leaving Grandpa sitting at the table, the glow of the phone screen still burning in front of him like a spotlight on his guilt. We drove in silence for a long time. Finally, Mom whispered, "Thank you." I didn't answer, because deep down I wasn't sure if I'd made things better. Or worse, because revenge doesn't end wars. It only escalates them, and I knew Grandpa wasn't finished. Not by a long shot. After that night, the house was never the same. Grandpa barely spoke to us. Mom stopped making peace offerings. No more mugs, no more wallets, no more carefully chosen gifts to smooth things over. It was cold silence. For weeks, Grandpa moved around the house like a ghost, muttering to himself, avoiding us. But his eyes were different. Darker. Harder. Like a man building something inside his head. And then came the night everything exploded. I was in my room finishing homework when I heard it. Mom's voice, sharp and trembling. I rushed to the kitchen and froze in the doorway. Grandpa was standing there, the little metal box clutched in his hands. The cash was spilling out onto the table. Mom stood across from him, her face pale, her hands shaking. "You think you humiliated me?" Grandpa's voice thundered. "Showing her my money? Turning her against me? You think you've won?" Mom's voice broke. "Dad, I never wanted to fight you. I just wanted to live. I wanted some joy in this house. But you—" He slammed the box on the table so hard the lid snapped open. "Joy? You call wasting money joy? You call teaching my grandson to disrespect me joy? You've poisoned him against me." I stepped forward, my heart racing. "No, Grandpa. You did that yourself." For a moment, the room was deadly silent. Grandpa looked at me. Really looked, like he was seeing me for the first time. Not a kid, not someone he could control, but an enemy. His lips curled. "You're just like her, weak, foolish." Mom's voice cracked like a whip. "Don't you dare talk to him like that." And then, it happened. Mom grabbed the box of cash, lifted it high, and with a wild cry dumped it straight into the sink. Grandpa lunged forward, but she was faster. She flicked the switch on the garbage disposal. The grinding roar filled the kitchen. Bills shredded, coins clattered, paper ripped to pieces. Grandpa screamed a raw animal sound as he tried to claw the money out with his bare hands. I rushed forward, pulling him back before he hurt himself. Mom stood there, tears streaming down her face, her hands shaking, but her eyes were steady. "It's over, Dad," she whispered. "No more control. No more gifts. No more games. It's over." Grandpa collapsed into a chair, breathing hard, staring at the shredded remains of his secret fortune. His face was pale, broken. For the first time, I saw him not as a tyrant, not as some unshakable force, but as an old man who had lost everything. Not just money, but pride, power, and control. Mom walked past him without another word, out the front door into the night. I followed her, my chest pounding, my head spinning. We sat in the car in silence. Finally, she turned to me. "You shouldn't have had to see that," she whispered. I shook my head. I had to, because this family, it's not about saving or spending anymore. It's about revenge. And tonight, you won. She looked out the window, her face hard to read. Relief, sadness? Maybe both. When we finally drove away, I looked back through the window. Grandpa was still sitting there at the table, staring at the empty box like it was a coffin, and I realized something that chilled me to my bones. Revenge doesn't leave winners. It only leaves survivors. That was the last night we lived under the same roof. Mom and I moved out a week later. Grandpa never called. We never went back, and sometimes, late at night, I still hear the sound of the garbage disposal grinding. Not just the sound of money being destroyed, but the sound of a family tearing itself apart.